Welcome to History 111, Lecture 35, The Compromise of 1850. The election of 1848 really stemmed from issues arising out of the Mexican War. Now, Polk was in poor health and declined to run again, and the Whigs nominate Zachary Taylor, who had been the hero of the Mexican War, and he's going to win over the Democratic nominee Lewis Cass. Now, Van Buren is going to run again as a Free Soil Party candidate. He's going to carry no states, but he is going to get 10% of the vote, and Free Soil candidates are going to take 10 seats in Congress. And success by this type of third party indicates the inability of a major party to handle a significant issue, and tends to be something that indicates a coming political realignment. Now, one of the first things to push the consequences of the Mexican War right to the front of American politics was the Wilmot Proviso. Now, David Wilmot from Pennsylvania proposed this, and it's an amendment that deals with slavery in the new territories. And the amendment said that any territory gained from Mexico, slavery could never exist. Now, this proposal outrages Southerners who felt that banning slavery in the West might lead to an eventual ban on slavery in the South, because what this was doing was establishing a federal precedent for banning slavery in a huge amount of territory. Now, John C. Calhoun, who is a South Carolina states' right advocate, is going to argue that the Wilmot Proviso is illegal and the federal government does not have the power to ban slavery. And this provision is going to stir passions on both sides. And the issue of slavery had already really begun to divide the nation along sectional lines, and this is going to really expand and drive a wedge here. Now, a new idea is proposed by Lewis Cass of Michigan, who is the man who just runs as the Democratic candidate for president. He's going to advocate popular sovereignty, and this is an idea that means the citizens of each new territory will decide for themselves if they want to permit slavery or not. So what that's going to mean is anywhere in the United States in a new territory, slavery will be a state issue and not a federal one, and it will also be decided by a vote. Now, this really comes to the front because in 1848, gold was discovered in California, and a year later, 80,000 49ers, as they're known, pour into the state to go mine. So California is then going to apply to become a free state in 1849. Now, if California is free, then the balance of the Senate goes towards free states and against slave states, and Southerners begin openly talking about secession again. With California applying for admission, this is really going to bring in the question of what to do with all this new territory gained from Mexico right to the forefront of Congress, and there's going to eventually be the Compromise of 1850. That's going to start with a series of resolutions from Henry Clay, and he's primarily concerned with the balance between free and slave states. And he's going to introduce a series of resolutions, and after 7 months of debate, his legislative package is going to be voted down, but that is going to lead into this compromise. So there's a bunch of players in the debate over Clay's resolutions that are ultimately going to frame the questions that make up the compromise. So Calhoun in particular warns the Senate that if they do not take appropriate action, it will be impossible for Southerners to remain in the Union with, as he put it, their honor and safety intact. Now, Daniel Webster, who is a Whig, starts talking about slavery as a matter of historical reality rather than moral principle. He talks about Congress prohibiting slavery in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and dividing the regions into slaves and free states in the 1820 Missouri Compromise. But he argues slavery cannot be removed where it already existed. And he said that since the Southwest is relatively barren, it's not suitable for the types of agriculture and cash crops that really to rely on slavery, so it's not going to expand there. Now, another important person, and this is William Henry Seward, who argues the Constitution's framers had recognized the existence of slavery and protected it where it existed. But the new territory was governed by, as he put it, a higher law than the Constitution, a moral law established by the creator of the universe, as he phrased it. So he warned the South that slavery was doomed and secession from the Union would ultimately be futile. So he argues that while the Constitution recognized slavery, God, he says, does not. Now, out of all of this comes together the Compromise of 1850, and it's really the work of Stephen Douglas, which relies not only on what Clay was thinking, but also on the various contributions and thoughts that we just covered. So the Compromise says this: California will be a free state. The borders of the state of Texas will be established. New Mexico and Utah will be settled based on popular sovereignty. There will be a strengthened fugitive slave law, and there will be an abolition of the slave trade within Washington, D.C. Now, what that's going to mean is that's going to be a way to go forward, but it's also going to contradict certain parts of the Missouri Compromise, and that unraveling of certain parts of established line where slavery can't go north of is going to upset many Northerners. And what you have to realize is the South is giving up the balance of 50-50 free and slave, but they're all getting for it the ability, theoretically, for New Mexico and Utah to become slave states, and Utah, by the way, is above that line that was established in 1820. So what's the big idea here? Well, the Compromise of 1850 is about what to do with all this new land. So this idea of maintaining a 50-50 balance between free and slave, that goes out the window. So they're basically going to go ahead and undo the Compromise of 1820. Now, the use of popular sovereignty as a method is going to lead to the potential for slavery north of that 1820 line, and that part really upsets Northerners. See you in the next lecture.